Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
What's up, Doom Nation, and welcome back. You're listening to the Two Doom Men podcast. As always, it's Skaggs and yours truly, the Captain, and we are here once again to cover the malarkey of the world. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Wednesday night live. Don't forget, if you are watching live, to drop a comment or chime in. We will answer it either after the segment or right before Tweets of the Week. If you're listening pre-recorded, try and join us when we do it live. Weeknights, 8 o'clock usually. Wednesday, Thursday, sometimes Tuesday, sometimes Monday. It's hard to predict, but I don't know. Follow us on our socials, and I usually give a heads up before we're going to do the live earlier in the day. That's how you know. We're here, but we're back. A couple things to talk about. We're going to do things a little bit differently for once. I was telling the Captain.
Yeah, we're going to get ahead of something, right?
Yeah, so two main topics tonight, plus a couple other things Captain wanted to discuss. Main topic number one is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is planning to come to America and address Congress in the next week or two. There's no date exactly set yet. They're trying to sort out their schedules. I thought we could, for once, instead of reacting to the news, because that's going to become big news when he does address Congress, and it'll be interesting afterwards to see how that plays out. I'm sure Kat, me and you will comment on it after again. But I kind of wanted to get ahead of the news and kind of, give our thoughts on some of the war propaganda he's definitely going to spread, and also share a really, really well done and interesting video I saw today that is pertinent and talks about October 7th and his role, and definitely some of his failures around October 7th. Let's just put it that way. Spoiling too much yet. After that, I thought we would talk about Dave Smith and Chris Cuomo's debate.
One of the best debates I've ever watched. Yeah. Hands down. And then I figure we'll wrap it up with a little bit of, Trump's got the 34 counts, and it's almost been we're a day shy of it being a week, right? And it's been interesting to say the least. Yeah.
Nothing happened before we started recording. It's just nice. Like, we could just go into the episode with what we planned straight away. So let's start off with Netanyahu.
Sure. The only issue I had with what you said about Netanyahu was address Congress is more like order Congress, command Congress to do what he wants. And there's something else, but I forgot. But yeah, he's coming here to. He is, right? He's coming here to be in charge.
I definitely think, obviously, he holds sway, which we'll get into, over politicians in America. The AIPAC Israeli lobby does, of course. They spend a tremendous amount of money out in the open to influence politicians to benefit Israel's policies or whatever. These sorts of things are kind of normal. I don't like them. Remember Zelensky came and addressed Congress maybe last year or the year before. People were holding up his flags. Look, the thing with Benjamin Netanyahu is he's done this before many times. It's not the first time he's come to Congress and addressed them. He, in the 2000s, after 9/11 came, and he addressed Congress as a regional expert And like, what should we do in the wake of 9/11? And it was one of his ideas is go after Saddam, and weapons of mass destruction. He helped push that whole thing. He's very close with the neocons and that whole lobby. They wrote the policy that he's been following all these years later in Israel since then. So it's very interesting, man. I will be interested to comment on it again. But let's start with, I want to get into this video, and let's go back to October 7th again. I know we kind of talked about this right after it happened. The whole thing seemed fishy.
Right. And how one of the most militarized nations, one of the most militarized surveillance nations was just caught off guard by a couple of guys in hang gliders and machine guns. Yeah, it seemed a little weird.
And I think this context is important now, more than ever, going into him coming here to address Congress, because he's going to talk about this, right? And he's going to use this as part of his pitch to Americans. He's not going to just address Congress. They're already in the bag for him, 99% of them. This speech is going to be put out to people. He's going to be convincing you why you should support more war in Gaza, and more funding and etc. to Israel and all of that. So,
hold on, before we play this, a question just popped in my head that I'd like to ask you. So clearly, the pro-Palestine group of Americans here are very loud, very vocal. They exercise their right to protest. As most people saw across all forms of social media the past weekend, a lot of the pro-Palestine protesters were blocking gay pride parades and such. The left eating their own. I can't imagine there's not going to be a monumental protest when he shows up. What do you think?
Oh, I would think so. They just haven't been able to organize it yet because the date hasn't been scheduled. I wonder, now that you're mentioning that, if that's why the date hasn't actually been announced.
And he just shows up on a
Tuesday, and bam, everyone's there in the building, ready to go. And they've been told, but the public hasn't been told. There is a huge pro-Palestine protest plan soon around the White House. I forgot what day, but I saw that shared the other day. Like some leftist group is planning that or something like that. So that's interesting. Yeah, it's a good point there, Cap. I didn't even think of that. Maybe they're purposefully not announcing what the day is yet. But
because I could imagine that's going to be a little Summer of Love reincarnation.
Yeah. I don't know about that. I don't think foreign policy things activate people as much as the BLM George Floyd thing did. But it will activate the activists, right? So they'll show up. But I don't see like the Palestine
fire and
cause making Americans burn down their own neighborhoods. I just don't, right? It's not, I would even, I like Jose Vega a lot. I would even caution him to not run too much on the Palestine issue in the Bronx, because I'm sure people in the Bronx care about Palestine, but to a certain extent. And if you only run on,
they want to fix the Bronx.
If you're only, and Richie Torres, who he's running against, only cares about Israel, right? That's it. So that there's an opportunity there. Don't just counter him on the point, which is a valid point to counter him on, but like concentrate on what people actually need in the area. That's what might make them want to vote for you. All right, so this post, let's get into it. This is a couple-minute video, which, wow, was really well done. It's by this account is called. I've never seen this account before, but it's well done. I look, like the claims it's making. They're well known. He's going to share some sources from Israeli newspapers like the Haaretz and the Times of Israel, which I want to say, man, something that's interesting about this whole war in Israel in general is the press in Israel is much more combative and open than in the way that it covers Benjamin Netanyahu and the government compared to the way it's covered here in America.
Right. Like, there's an agenda here,
but it's just an interesting concept that, you'd think that their own major newspapers would just be in the bag for whatever the regime over there wants. They're not. Our regime over here and our corporate press and media and etc. You're never going to see any of this that we're about to play here on their shows.
That's part of what I want to get into when we talk about Dave Smith, Chris Cuomo's debate.
Yeah,
it's a lot of this all wraps into one whole topic here.
All right, so from Truth in Media, it's a couple-minute long, like 4 or 5 minutes long. We'll watch, we'll comment. And they say 10 days before October 7th, and again 3 days before, Egypt's intelligence officials repeatedly warned the Israeli government of an impending attack from Hamas. Egypt's premier intelligence minister even personally warned Netanyahu that Hamas was planning something unusual, a terrible operation. Israeli civilians and military officials also brought these warnings to Netanyahu's government, but were ignored and in some cases threatened with legal action. But why? We explored a question never before seen detail in this week's episode of Reckoning Israel and Gaza. I'm skipping ahead to like 8.5 minutes here or so. He references a ton of examples about how the Israeli government was warned that something was going on. He even references some examples of how Israeli citizens that live near the border fence of Gaza saw Hamas practicing, like with like a lot of guys organized on the other side of the fence doing stuff, and they're like, "Hey, this is pretty suspicious." And this guy references the communication these citizens gave to the IDF, like, "Hey, something's going on here. We're concerned. We're not sure what's going on in the lead up to October 7th." And he carefully documents how these concerns were either ignored, people had lawsuits threatened against them for speaking out about this, and all these sorts of things. But I've skipped ahead to the part, because it's a long video, it's about 15 minutes, it's worth the watch. I've skipped ahead to the part where they're going to specifically talk about the music festivals, the dance festivals, that, if you remember, were happening on October 7th.
Big rave party.
The rave, the Nova, and a lot of innocent kids were killed. It's insane what Hamas did. We're not defending Hamas or any of that shit. I don't think we even need to mention that anymore. I'm just trying to show you why Benjamin Netanyahu should not be trusted at all before he decides to address our Congress here. So let's get into the video, and we'll comment. I'll stop talking.
And yet 2 days before October 7th, the Israeli military took 2 entire commando brigades, that's around 100 soldiers, away from the soon-to-be breached locations of the Gaza border and sent them to the other side of the country, to the West Bank village of Huwara. Despite no Hamas presence being in Huwara, and despite there being giant Israeli dance parties taking place right along the same border fence, where violent, escalating, and obvious Hamas drills of breaching and kidnapping were taking place. Does this make any sense? And have you heard about these dance parties? Because it turns out there's bizarre and inexplicable narratives surrounding the planning of these now infamous dance parties in Israel along the Gaza border. What had not been widely reported is the fact that there were actually 2 back-to-back dance parties in Kibbutz Riyam, which is also the location of the IDF's Gaza division, and it's only 3 miles from the Gaza border. The first party, planned months in advance, was a party called the Unity Festival. It took place on October 5th and 6th. Then the Nova Festival, the October 7th party, was actually added last minute, only a few days in advance of the event. So for obvious reasons, any significantly large gatherings on the Israeli side of the border with Gaza require Israeli military approval. Again,
this is something I didn't know, and this is interesting. If you're going to have a big-ass group of people down there that close to the border, the military has to approve it, because they have to provide the security and all these things. I didn't know this before. This is interesting. Some new information here coming out.
Again, this is a part of the story that virtually no American media network will talk about. According to Israeli media reports, Lieutenant Colonel Sahir Fogel, an operations officer at the IDF's Gaza division, opposed the approval of the Nova Party based on a couple of things: the last-minute nature of its event application, the intensifying Hamas drills at the border, and because if something were to happen, more soldiers were on holiday. It was the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. The lieutenant colonel explained his opposition to the party's approval to his superiors, and he was instructed to allow the event to happen. Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that other Gaza division officers privately told of irregular conduct and pressure surrounding the approval of that party. In February,
nothing suspicious.
Yeah, so I'll pause here for a second. Like we said before,
think of so Doom Nation, Skaggs and I have had a long history of partying, and the one thing that ruins parties is rules and regulations. And now here's I'm not saying they're not a modern country, but this is a heavily militarized country that has a much different culture than America. And it's so odd to me to see that there's pressure to add another dance party on this particular weekend, when it's not like the military has financial stakes in throwing another party. You know what I mean? Like, if anything, I would see the military being like anti-party. We don't need another party. A lot of people are a lot of the soldiers are on holiday because of the Jewish holiday and all this stuff. It's starting to seem to me, because Doom Nation, I'm watching this live. I forgot to watch this video when Skag sent it to me because I'm an idiot. But nonetheless, like, I find it just so odd and suspicious that the military is pressuring like this party happening. I don't think the military's ever pressured a party to happen. You know?
So a couple things. You're right. You were both probably not that familiar with like the culture over there and the dynamic between civilians and the military. It's definitely different from how we do things here in America. I guess you could kind of, especially in that region, kind of consider the IDF the police in that area as well as the military. It is odd. Given all that, I don't know. Like, if you have an actual military commander report back to superiors, hey, I don't think we should actually approve this one. Seems like something's going on. Maybe it's not the best bet. It's a bit odd that the military higher-ups would be invested in making sure a dance rave party occurs after 2 other ones just occurred the previous 2 days. Like, it's an odd thing for the military to be invested in. I think the most common answer in most usual circumstances would probably be like, well, no, don't sign the approval. They've had their fun, and it's not worth not just the risk, but it's probably not worth like the effort of us policing the event, because I'm sure this costs taxpayer money and whatnot. By the way, that comes from America. So it's weird. Like, from a foundational principle, it just doesn't seem like something they would be interested in pushing.
Why take on the headache? Why take on the headache?
Why not trust in that scenario your guy in the region who's there on the ground, knows the people, knows what's going on a little bit better? Why not just go with that guy's gut instinct and some higher up overrule him? It's a weird premise, definitely, to say the least. Put your tinfoil hats on here, folks. All right, let's go back and
let's get back into it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to start looking into this guy's Twitter account more. This is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Definitely, like I said, it's well sourced. The earlier part of it, definitely, and this is well here too. Again, because I know one of the immediate dismissals is going to be like, who's this guy? He's just making stuff up and whatnot. But he cited even Haaretz, a minute or 2 ago.
And feel free to check his page out. I mean, do your own research, right?
Of course, yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Of the Nova Festival gave an interview to Israel's Channel 14 where he made a statement that has not been reported on by any American media. He said this, quote, "I had a guard at the festival who had served in the Ream division near the Gaza border. And a week before the festival, he sent me a voice message, basically warning me, saying, quote, Elkanah, something is going to happen over Sukkot. I just wanted to let you know there were a lot of warnings. I passed the voice message on to the local IDF officials, and they told me everything was all right." After the attack, Fetterman called his friend in the IDF and asked him exactly what he knew, saying, quote, "You were speaking in codes. Tell me exactly what they told you." Tell me, Elkanah, they told me there was going to be an invasion and that they were planning to take over settlements. I just wasn't allowed to tell you that. And that's what happened. If he knew what he knew, a driver on the Gaza border, what did those above him know? Because he is a small screw in the system, end quote. The Hamas attacks were violent and brutal, and they've been likened to tragic events such as the September 11th attacks or even the Holocaust, which makes it strange that Benjamin Netanyahu and members of his party have at times described these attacks as somewhat of a political gift. Hassim Vaturi, a member of Netanyahu's party in the Knesset, referred to the attack as sort of a gift from God because they are being used to justify the current ongoing war, stating, quote, "We were meant to fight this war against Hamas, as is happening now. And luckily for us, it came from the heavens."
All right. Yeah. So, look, I think me and you have covered pretty well what Netanyahu's goal in Gaza is. We had a full episode on that concept. I suggest people check out. What to even say here? I mean,
I know we have to say something because there's people listening, but I'm like, this is what we've been saying from the start. I was explaining to my father, I was like, Israel has this plan to own everything from the river to the sea, you know, and this minor attack started off this giant war. It's a super militarized country. It's a super surveillance state. And, you know, clearly there was top brass on both sides saying, look, something's going to happen. It's all been ignored. And that, oh, it's a political gift. Yeah, I'm not going to say I know for sure and I have no evidence, but you knew it was going to happen. You let it happen so then you could carry out your plan of genocide. So, and I know people don't like the word genocide, but whatever. That's the word I use.
I don't use that word, but you're usually way more careless than I am. And if you want to be careless in that way, then go ahead. I'm not going to stop you in that regard. That's the way I look at it, as like the Trump guy on this show. I find that whole dynamic interesting with you. But yeah, like the picture here is that not only what you just watched, but the warnings, which I didn't play the whole thing, the warnings from Egypt's intelligence officers saying that, hey, something's going on. And there was a lot more than just that. That's kind of just the suspiciousness around the festivals being planned. But the point here I'm trying to get is Netanyahu comes in here to tell us why we should support his war forever. And other wars, I'm sure, against Iran and whatnot. He's, going to be completely happy with American taxpayer dollars and even soldiers going over, to the Middle East to fight wars for him. Is that he doesn't deserve, no matter what. If you want to go down the rabbit hole on this and say that he made certain moves here, I'm not saying that this is complete speculation. Right. That he did certain things here to allow the attack to happen so that he could then use the attack as justification for him to completely finish their project of taking over, at least without having to play this game anymore of the West Bank and Gaza over, we don't control those areas. It's the Palestinian Authority. Or it was no matter what, put even that aside. It was a complete massive failure by Benjamin Netanyahu.
At all levels.
Yeah. Right? They had warnings.
Go on.
Yeah, they had warnings from intelligence, from soldiers within their own military, from civilians, from the community, and they failed to prevent this attack, which led to 1,300 people being killed, hundreds of hostages being taken, now a war after. So no matter what, he deserves scrutiny, even if you don't want to go down the rabbit hole on it.
Yeah. Even if you support Israel. Yeah.
The buck stops with who's in charge, right? Yeah. Who was in charge? Benjamin Netanyahu. Who's going to come here and sell you on why you should support his war? Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think he deserves in an adult world, right, where we're all grown-ups and we're responsible. He doesn't get to come over here and tell us what he thinks we should do. He's lost all his credibility. That's why you have actually seen some protests and things in Israel against him, because there is a portion of the Israeli population which understands this. It's been covered there, and they're way more combative than the American media and population and politicians are. I find that dynamic to be a little bit bizarre, where it's, again, like I was referencing before, it's more normal. It's normally more in the discussion in Israel than it is over here. Any of these concepts about Netanyahu specifically.
Right. And, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but, Dave said something in the debate where it's just amazing that, a person of power could say something. And me and you are not people of power. Somebody like Chris Cuomo was a person of power. Chris Cuomo said A, we said no, it's B. And 100% of the time, the person in power was deemed correct. And 95% of the time, we were deemed, you guys are wrong, misinformation, you should be censored. And here you are once again in the same power struggle where civilians, soldiers, other military operations in Egypt were telling the people in power not to do this. There's something coming. And the people in power make the wrong decision. Lives are lost. Wars are started. Billions are thrown away. And there's no accountability. And then they'll come here and propagate us all.
Yeah.
To continue going down the path of the mistake they originally made.
Imagine if, and it's just so bizarre, right? Because would you agree that the pullout of Afghanistan was an absolute unmitigated
Shit
disaster?
show? Yes.
Right. And that, which every, conservative and Republican would blame Joe Biden for that occurring. Right. The buck stops with Joe Biden in that regard. But in this, spin this around. The same logic here applies to Benjamin Netanyahu. He was in charge. The thing was a disaster. It fell apart. People died that didn't need to. But in this sense, they're completely okay with him coming here and not holding him to that same standard that they're holding Biden. Now, I'm not defending Biden. I think both of these guys are absolute disasters, right? But there's a couple contradictions here outside of even that. The International Criminal Court, issued that arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. Congress actually passed. So the House actually passed sanctions against the International Criminal Court for doing this to Netanyahu.
Really?
Right. It's probably not going to pass the Senate, and Biden, right, it probably won't get that far, but they actually did pass sanctions against the ICC. Now, I'm not a globalist. I could give a shit less about the ICC, right? But when the ICC issued an arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin, the same people in Congress were like, yeah, go ahead. Go in there and arrest him. What did Lindsey Graham say? To assassinate Vladimir Putin at the time, right after that occurred? So it's like in one case, they're all for it. In the other case, they're literally sanctioning the organization. So there's some hypocrisy there as well.
Yeah, and for peeking your head in the rabbit hole, you want to find out who's in control. Who can you not talk about? Who can you not stand up against? Russia was able to be sanctioned and they were able to go and issue arrest warrants or whatever for Putin. No problem, because he doesn't own them. Israel has this huge sway in American politics and in Congress. And you can't tell me that somebody didn't get greased along the way. Somebody didn't end up with a few extra dollars in their pocket.
They don't even hide it. AIPAC is a political action committee.
There you go.
Explicitly,
perfect example.
There should be a foreign agent, which I've said many times. If you're registered as a foreign agent, they're literally a political action committee explicitly lobbying Congress on behalf of a foreign country.
You had that great the post on Instagram. If you change that I to Italian, you would call it the mafia.
Yeah, they would call it the mafia, right? If there was the the American Italian Political Action Committee, lobbying Congress to give money to Palermo, the mob in Sicily, so they could do stuff or whatever. Exactly right. It'd been run out of town. So you got to wonder, man. Going back to Dave Smith real quick. I remember he was on Rogan recently, and Dave Smith's had like 8 or 9 debates about Israel, Palestine, and I've watched almost all of them. And he brings usually this concept up about Netanyahu and his failure around October 7th, and his previous support for Hamas. He always brings that one up to whoever he's debating, whether it's Dennis Prager or Laura Loomer. And it's so interesting because those people he's debating, they either never heard of these concepts before, or they just kind of like slink away and never grapple with the concept. You got to wonder, what is that? Why is that happening? Does Benjamin Netanyahu have something on majority of these people that are there pushing? You got to really wonder. It's bizarre. Imagine if me and you are literally sitting across the table from someone in here in the man cave, and we bring up a concept to them, and they just tap dance around it and never answer. I think me and you don't debate people like this, so I think that's fucking bizarre. Right? Like, hey, you're going to answer my question or talk about this thing I meant reference,
or circle back, let's answer that now.
So it's a bizarre concept. Now, again, the intention of this is going into his speech coming up here in Congress. I think my predictions are going to be, you're going to hear a lot of the same talking points, style of talk that you heard after 9/11. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists.
Right.
Hamas, they hate us because we're the only democracy in the region, and they want to kill us all. They want to genocide against.
Oh yeah, we got to save democracy.
Yeah. So these are my, this is what I'm betting on. This sort of rhetoric is going to come out of Netanyahu when he addresses Congress, and I kind of wanted to parlay that into. I actually just tried to dive back into Scott Horton's Enough Already book. And I actually sent this to you, Captain, because I thought it was so interesting. Figured I'd show it on the show here as well. This is, and I'm kind of mentioning this with my America First MAGA Republican friends in mind, who will probably take the opinion that they'll fall for these things easier. They hate us for our freedoms, and you know, like these dirty terrorists, who gives a shit, bomb them all or whatever. Diving back into the book, enough already. I thought that this excerpt was about what actually motivates Islamic men to turn to terrorism is something every America First conservative needs to be aware of now that there are consistent pro-Palestine demonstrations in the West. So this is Scott Horton, and he's referencing a former CIA bin Laden unit chief, Michael Schur, has emphasized when Iran's Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini spent the 1980s denouncing America's corrupt popular culture, no one was moved in Iran. Were conservative religious leaders concerned about American culture polluting young minds? Yes, of course they were. Was this enough to motivate men to want to kill and die in a war against the United States? No, it wasn't. When bin Laden became kind of the figurehead of this opposition to America,
there was a face to go with the boogeyman,
right? Bin Laden chose instead to harp on real, tangible, destructive U.S. government policies in Arab countries. This enabled him to recruit a small army of terrorists willing to do his bidding, even at the cost of their own lives. So what is this? This is a CIA chief, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about them all the time. They're nefarious, but they know their shit. They're not dumb people.
Yeah, right.
They understand that acts of terrorism are, like I kind of said in the last episode, they're motivated by foreign policy objectives and bombs blowing up your family, and then you having an axe to grind against the people who sent the bomb, supplied the bomb, had the policy of enabling the bomb throwers, right? Things like this. This is not anything special to do with Islamic men, Islam. After 9/11, didn't Americans sign up in record numbers to go fight back against the terrorists who did that? That's the same fucking concept, right? When you are attacked, you are motivated to go and get justice for the people who did it to you, right? And that's what actually gets people to go and do these things. Were we fighting? Were American men signing up in record numbers before 9/11 because Islam is not compatible with Western cultures and values? No,
nobody cared.
Gave a shit at all. Right? No one was even concerned about anything to do with that. Right? It wasn't until 9/11 happened that people were motivated to go and actually kill people over there. Right? Now just flip that. That's human nature. That's how humans behave. So try and break out of this way of thinking, because it's not America First to not understand this concept. It's not going to be America First to go and fight a war so that Benjamin Netanyahu can solidify
stay in power,
right? His power and his control over their borders. That's their problem. I don't even not like Israel, right? Or Israeli people.
Right.
It looks like a really cool place. The parties, right? Yeah. They've invented a lot of cool shit over there. I don't hate Israelis at all. I just don't like their government. So for conservatives, this shouldn't be a fucking foreign concept that you don't trust the government, whether it's the American government of Joe Biden or the Benjamin Netanyahu government of Israel. I need that concept to be understood as he's coming in here to spew us a bunch of shit. Please, MAGA people.
Yeah,
open mind here, folks.
We'll see what happens. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, it's strange how war specifically changes people and changes ideology, because it was pretty cut and clear. No, we don't want to give money to Ukraine. No, we don't want to give money to Ukraine. Oh yeah, we want to give money to Israel. Like there's something about war that that just throws all logic out the window.
It does. Of course, it does. It does on many different levels. And again, we're going back to my MAGA conservative friends, folk. When Zelensky did come here and pitch Congress, y'all hated that. You made memes. You talk shit about him. You said that these people in Congress should be treated as traitors for flying the Ukrainian flag, which I 100% agree with you. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that energy ain't gonna be here when Benjamin Netanyahu does the exact same thing. I'm also gonna put prediction down right now: an Israeli flag will be propped up in Congress the same way Zelensky did. Or something
you'll be able to add to our opening scene the Israeli military marching down DC.
Right, something like that. So that's my point. I thought we could get ahead of the propaganda. And look, I've been telling you and
it's always fun to have receipts, right?
Yeah, I've been telling you and Garrett, like, they think tank this shit, and there's a reason why they keep trying propaganda, because it works. And I'm not going to be surprised if they roll out the lazy 9/11 propaganda all over again and just slap on
Mm-hmm.
new terms on it because it's a different scenario.
Remarket the playbook.
Remarket the playbook just in a different way. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't be surprised about that.
Neither would I. It'll be interesting to see who falls for it and the rhetoric around it, because once again they got this diversity shield that right now, for what me and you have been saying, we will be deemed anti-Semitic. Yeah,
no, of course we will. Right, just like we're deemed racist or Putin apologists,
xenophobic,
or anti-vaxxers, or whatever,
deplorable,
grandma, all those things. All right, so you ready? Let's go on to the next topic. Dave Smith, Chris Cuomo.
This was one of the best debates I've ever seen. This was interesting on so many levels. I will start off props to Chris Cuomo. He took it on the chin. He tried fighting. My view of mainstream media is probably even worse now than it was before. The idea, we've always asked this question, are they just stupid and don't know, or are they acting nefariously? It's kind of clear cut now, the fact that it's years later. Cuomo is a complete hypocrite about it all, still will not apologize, still will back up the machine, still will challenge Dave Smith to his face when they're playing clips showing, what the fuck was that?
The house is burning down.
Yeah, showing that Dave is wrong. Hold on, I gotta make sure this place isn't burning. I'm sorry, Doom Nation.
That's all right. I'll keep it going. Yeah, I'll tell you, man, it is something interesting to see Chris Cuomo go up there and do these sorts of things. My personal opinion, while we wait here for Captain to come back, I think Chris Cuomo is probably the lowest of the low in terms of propagandists. And the reason why he refuses to apologize for any of the things he did during COVID and his behavior on CNN, I'm saying here, Captain, my opinion.
Stupid to even get into it.
That's okay. I'm saying here my opinion on why Chris Cuomo refuses to apologize, or why he's behaving in this debate in this manner where we see how he's obviously wrong. Dave is obviously has a superior argument and is correct. It's because he's probably trying to protect his career and even a chance of going back to work at CNN. As much as you kind of want to talk a little bit shit about them here and there, I think he's part of the beast, right?
He is.
And he's signaling, I'm a company guy through and through, right? So,
I never thought of it from the point of view of trying to go back to CNN, but, PBD did talk about redemption stories and stuff. And, Cuomo showed up and took his licks, and there's no one else doing this. Anthony Fauci's not going to do it. Rachel Maddow's not going to do something like this. Nobody from The View is going to do anything like this. All these people who got out there, all these talking heads who got out there, even from the political class, Chuck Schumer's not going to go out there and do something like this. Nancy Pelosi, he's at a crossroads right now. Mm-hmm. He could wake up and throw the companies under the bus throw the regime under the bus and expose the system and come out a hero on the other end of this big redemption story, or like all these talking heads do, and it's a Cuomo trait, double down, triple down, dig your heels in, and just never admit fault. And it's wild. It was really, to have a live audience there was fantastic. That is why every time Joe Biden debates, he refuses to have a live audience there.
That's a great point. That would happen. What happened to Cuomo here?
Yes.
What happened to Biden?
Forget Dave dunking on Cuomo, or forget Trump owning Biden in a debate. You would have real-time voters in the audience in real time reacting to the nonsense this moron is saying, and it would make him look horrible. There'd be no way they could do it.
Yeah,
you know, for him to come out and be like, "Oh, inflation's down. Oh, employment's up. Blah blah blah. Americans love their life." The crowd would go ballistic, and it was a great part of the debate because Cuomo had to deal with the crowd as well. You could tell when he was spewing bullshit because they let him know.
Yep. It's a great debate. I highly suggest anybody who doesn't even know what we're talking about, go watch it. It's on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, PBD, Dave Smith versus Chris Cuomo. Man, I also just love the fact that it's Dave Smith who got to do this. Like I was saying in our last episode, like the real leader of the libertarian movement, it's the one who goes and gets the only measure of revenge we've gotten so far for the whole COVID shenanigans to date happens to be from Dave Smith. So that's just fucking awesome and cool to begin with. There's a lot of nuanced, smart, clever, and funny back and forth in this debate, right? A lot. Dave's not an idiot. Dave knows his shit. And we're not going to cover any of those interesting, clever, smart parts of debate. We have one of the dumb things that I chose to play as the clip for you guys because it's kind of more of our level of things here, right? Yeah. And it's
two new men. What did you think?
Yeah, and it's also because there were so many clever, intelligent, scientific parts of this debate that did go viral. I think everyone seemed to overlook this part of it, which I thought was one of the more interesting parts. To be honest with you, when I watched it in the moment, I was like, I think we should maybe cover that. That's really interesting in of itself. So what am I talking about? Talking about Chris Cuomo in his basement, if you remember when Chris Cuomo got COVID back during the height of the pandemic. He went down in his basement. He filmed in his basement. They filmed a whole skit, which I will play for you guys after this, in his basement. And then he was caught outside of his basement by a guy in the Hamptons, riding his bike. And it became a whole story. So Dave Smith, give him credit. Asks him, was the basement thing fake or not? Just a very simple question. And let's listen to what Chris Cuomo has to say.
Let me ask you. I couldn't have that much power. I got fired. But that's fair enough. Okay. So let me ask you about what you do own. And in the spirit of we're being honest here, and our currency is the truth. Your reemergence from your basement, real or fake?
Yes. If you want the answer, I'll give it to you. All right. Here's what I was told. The short answer is real. Here's what I was told.
You were quarantined that whole time in your basement?
Yeah.
You didn't leave?
Oh, yeah. No. This is what happened. I was quarantined the time I needed to be. I forget. There was 3 days with fever below 99 or whatever the number was. You guys vaguely remember the same as I had a problem. I had fever for a very long time. They didn't understand why. It had something to do with how my body was responding to the spike protein we now know based on my blood test now. I got to that point of being allowed to leave, but I still had fever because my natural body temperature is not 98.6, it's 97.6. So for me, being just under 100 or whatever the level was, I forgot. Rob, they can find out what the level was. I had it, but I didn't feel comfortable because I still felt sick. And at the time, the biggest names in our government who I was in contact with couldn't tell me what was the safest thing to do because I was afraid of getting my family. So what they said was, do it in stages. So I would kind of come upstairs with the N95 on and I would try to get some energy, walk up and down the stairs. Then it was, I'm going to come upstairs. The house was, because my wife was taking care of everybody because everybody was getting sick. And I would do a little bit of cleaning, come back down. Still wasn't living upstairs. Then I would come up, I'd start cooking because my wife got sick from me. That's a great thing to have over your spouse, by the way. So I then started coming up more and I phased up and in. Our youngest, when I was coming up, finally I could move upstairs. Everybody was good with it. Christina had gotten sick. Mario had gotten sick. The other two hadn't. It had been about 10 days past when I was supposedly allowed to come up. But again, I still felt like shit. And I knew that I had a fever. I didn't have a fever by their definition, but I had a fever. So then when it was finally over, they took the picture of me coming upstairs.
Hold on. What's a fever by his definition and not their definitions? He is listening to the government, CDC guidelines, World Health Organization, and the whole argument was that we did it. The entire show, his argument is, well, we didn't know. There wasn't enough research. We had to trust these institutes. They were the only ones that were purveying this. And now all of a sudden, he's not following their guidelines, and he's just going off on his own quote unquote definition of a fever.
Who knows what their normal body temperature is on any, like, who the fuck knows that? Yeah. I'm 35. I don't know what my normal average body temperature is.
Neither do I.
I'm not even sure most of the time, like, what is the temperature that's considered a fever? I'm not even 100% sure. Like,
I think it's over 98.
Right. Like, something. I'm not exactly sure. I'm kind of sure, right? But this guy knows what his own temperature is on average. Give me a break. It's more of the same if I keep playing it here. This is one of those scenarios where someone is lying so much, then they just can't stop lying.
Yeah.
They just keep lying more and more. And you're like, oh my God, stop talking. Like, you're giving out too much information. I don't think we need to be nuanced policy analysts or experts in, like, demeanor or physical appearance or things like that. Anyone could watch this and be like, holy shit, this guy's lying through his teeth right now. And Dave Smith asked him a simple question. Was it real or was it fake? And he goes on like a 10
and he's shaking in his boots. Yeah.
Filibuster diatribe about every tiny detail from, here to the Hamptons over. I got this person sick and that person sick. I went upstairs and I cleaned and, I had to do this and do that and do that. And just like, was it fake or not? So it was obviously fake in my opinion. And I just thought that was hysterical. The lengths he will go to preserve the lie he told is extraordinary. He to the point where he is embarrassing himself. It's almost one of those rituals. What are those rituals that they say people got to do?
Oh, the humiliation rituals for the celebrities.
Ritual. Like, Dave Smith almost puts him through a humiliation ritual. Not inadvertently.
Yeah.
He could have just been like, I lied. I'm sorry. It was made up. It's crazy.
But are you going to play the clip, or are you going to play the more cringeworthy clip now?
So here is the thing.
Now, the most cringeworthy thing you will witness all night.
The internet's forever. So let's go back. And I was telling you before we even started, I mean, this was a long time ago now. This is like 4 years ago. People must have forgot about this. But the internet's forever. So here is the video that they're referencing of Chris Cuomo coming out of the basement for the first time.
All right, here it is. The official re-entry from the basement, cleared by CDC. A little sweaty, just worked out. Happens. This is what I've been dreaming of, literally, for weeks. My wife, she was cleared by the CDC. She doesn't have fever. She doesn't have the symptoms anymore. More than 7 days from her quarantine. I'm still a little scared, so I just give you one of these. 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 Bella has, of course, taken the video. This is the dream, just to be back up here doing normal things. Thank you for being so nice to me. Thank you for taking care of everything you had to. Thank you for taking care of me. And Bella, thank you for stepping up and now adding family videographer to your resume.
Yes, President.
She's rolling her eyes.
Yeah, me too.
Wow. It's not for me. Thank you. This is for when we go outside. That's what we have to do now, all of us in New York. So anyway, I'm back. Let's get after it.
I hate Chris Cuomo, but boy, like I'm embarrassed for him as I'm watching that.
Yeah. We talked about, we mentioned how, are they nefarious or are they just stupid? And some of it is stupidity, because he pushed onto CNN a lot that, well, this is just what they told us. This is what, they just told us this is what we had to do and say. Okay, but you're a journalist. Maybe you should fucking figure it out for yourself and ask a few questions, not just regurgitate what Project Mockingbird email in the morning told you to regurgitate. But as it goes on, you could just clearly see either he doesn't get that the establishment he was working for was corrupt, or, which I'm landing on, he has to know it's corrupt and he is still covering for it.
He knows. He's a company guy.
Yeah.
Look, again, just like I said from the video with him and Dave, anybody could watch that and That's obviously phony, the whole thing, right? It's a staged propaganda skit that CNN, part of the regime, is pushing. This was aired, I'm sure on the channels on his Instagram. Couple things stand out to me. His children's reaction. They're not happy to see him.
Yeah.
They seem annoyed by the whole thing to begin with. So that tells me either two things. As a dad, right, if I was away from my child from 10 days, and the first time I reemerge and saw my child, they'd be over the moon to see me, right? Because they'd be like, oh my God, Dad, I haven't seen you in such a long time. His kids either hate him or he's actually been up there many times before, and this isn't
and this is all bullshit.
This is all bullshit, and they don't like kids are more ruthlessly honest than adults are.
They can't act the way old dad can.
Right. You know what I mean? I'm not saying kids can't be manipulative. They can, right? But when it comes to shit like this, they're not manipulative in that sort of way. Yeah. It's very hard to get them to kind of go along with one of these cringe skits that dad is doing. So either they hate him,
especially on a level, I mean, those kids are young. So the idea of propaganda, the idea of setting up like I wouldn't call that a false flag, but I don't know how else, we could,
it's propaganda. It's a skit. It's a propaganda skit. And I'm sure the kids probably in their minds are like, oh my God, Dad, this is so cringe.
Yeah.
They probably having the exact same thought. Like, it's just so cringe. You're so lame.
You weren't even sick. You weren't down there all week. Yeah.
Right.
You're making, videos. There probably was a moment where they had to sit down and be like, all right, we can't talk about this to our friends,
I'm sure. And again, going and now comparing this video, comparing to what he said in his 10-minute long diatribe with Dave, that's not how he spun the video of him coming out of the basement. He spun it as this is the first time officially I'm coming out. And it's spun as if he had actually been in there the 10 days.
And so let's not forget, I still remember when he had COVID, the story of him riding his bike around whatever corner of the fucking Hamptons it was, southeast, northwest, Montauk, New Jersey, whatever, that happened in the middle of his quarantine.
Right.
Those pictures, you had a quarantine back then for what, like 10, 14 days or something like that?
I think
2 weeks or whatever.
2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. And that shit emerged way before his 2 weeks were up.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying.
Another thing, we were texting about this, and I think I'm going to criticize Dave Smith here. He didn't pick up on this part, but Chris Cuomo admitted that he talked directly to the CDC about his own symptoms and his own sickness. Now, that's a bit bizarre, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, the CDC put out guidelines and things like this at the time that any mook like me and the captain here could have gone and looked at. But boy, to have like a direct connect at the CDC who's going to tell you, diagnose you, clear you, tell you what to do yourself on your own condition. He's admitting that he's part of the machine, right? Like he literally picks up a phone. Hey, CDC agent, give me my diagnosis and tell me what I should do on this sickness. And they tell him what to do. So again, like, you don't think that other conversations probably aren't happening there, and he's not getting pointers on what to say on the show when he's trying to sell you fear and propaganda about the pandemic at this time? Yes, of course he obviously is. Yeah, that's speculation on my part, but this is where Garrett would be correct. How much more do I have to convince you in this scenario that that's probably what was going on behind the scenes? So I thought that was pretty interesting. That was almost an accidental admission. That's what he exists for, and he still is still trying to continue to exist for, protecting powerful centers of people and government and things like this, and working intertwined with them. And that's just more of evidence. That's what CNN and the corporate press are. It's not just Dave pointed this out. It's not just you I'm criticizing here. You don't own all of CNN. You just own what you did. But that's what they're all doing. All of them, every aspect, maybe with slight differences here and there, but that's what they're all doing.
There was a line that Dave had, and I'll butcher it, so I'm going to paraphrase, but it was something along the lines was, maybe the problem with CNN is that it praises the institutions a little too much.
Yeah.
There's these mainstream media corporations, there's no pushback on any institution, on any three-letter agency, and against any politician who's, there's a D in front of their name. There's pushback on Donald Trump, MAGA First Republicans, and anybody that wouldn't lockstep follow
anyone
their
who
orders.
Challenges the power center on any topic that would challenge the power center, especially war, right? Like they're all in agreement on wars most of the time. War good, anti-war bad, anything like that. Yes, they're in lockstep agreement, even across the spectrum. You know, people will be like, well, at least there's Fox News. They're this exact same.
No.
They're just, they
Always
just
try and
pretend.
remind people. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was interesting. I highly recommend everybody go and watch that.
It's 3 hours long, but you know what? If I could do it, you could do it because boy, it's worth every minute of it.
I'm proud of you. Watch that whole thing, Cap.
Took me 3 days, but
it took me 3 days too.
Yeah.
I will. It's hard to watch a 3 hour long podcast.
Yeah.
All right. So, any other thoughts before we go on tweets of the week and wrap it up?
Let's just comment. I just want to personally comment. So, just under a week ago, Trump was found guilty of all 34 counts. And boy, what an interesting situation. If Trump was found innocent, his poll numbers would have went up. If Trump was found guilty, as they obviously have, his poll numbers have gone up. The donations have been wildly insane. I had said last week the left is willing, or the deep state is willing, to get Trump at any cost, even if that cost is, exposing the system. And boy, Trump made $200 million in donations and counting in like a weekend. It has been record setting. This has to be an oh shit moment. And it's interesting because we still haven't gotten the sentencing yet. This sentencing can increase Donald Trump's support even more if they if they go overboard and throw the absolute book at him. The other interesting thing is Hunter Biden's jury is being selected for his gun charges. And the Bidens are not in the same boat Trump's in. If Hunter Biden is found guilty, Biden will lose support. If Hunter Biden is let off easily and they just throw out these charges and give him a little slap on the wrist, Trump will have more ammo to say, look at how one-sided
Biden will lose support.
Biden will lose support.
No matter what outcome, Biden will lose support. No matter what outcome for Trump, he'll gain support.
Yes, it's a very interesting scenario that we have on our hands. And it's crazy to see that people are calling for Biden and Hochul to pardon Trump. And I think, not because I'm a Trump fan or a supporter, I think that's the best move the left could make, because it will give them an actual substantial moral high ground to go into the debate and be like, look, I pardoned you. You wouldn't do the same for me. And they would have that over them, and it would be factual. It wouldn't be some made-up bullshit that your economy sucked and mine's better. They would actually have this on them.
It would pour water on that concept that no matter what we do to Trump, it's going to help him, and no matter what happens to us, it's going to hurt us. It would actually pour water on that fire. It would stop. It maybe wouldn't necessarily help them win, but it would stop them from bleeding so much, which right now they can't stop the bleeding no matter what they do. So, yeah, that's a great point, man. I definitely agree with that. Like in the 4D chess realm, that would be a great 4D chess move. I bet you Trump actually wouldn't be happy if he got pardoned.
No, I guarantee you the last thing he wants is to be pardoned.
Yeah. I saw an interview recently. Trump said he's okay with going to jail if that's what he has to do.
Because he ain't worried. Because he's going to appeal it. It'll take forever. He ain't ever going to go behind bars. But the harder they go on it, they go on him, the worse they make it for themselves.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
That's an interesting concept, man. Definitely. Like psychologically at this point. Put aside all the conspiracy theories.
There's no conspiracy here.
But all aside, I'm just talking straight human psychology.
Yeah.
That is fucking interesting. I agree.
I'm enamored by it. But all right. And, I know I said last week I wasn't going to have any tweets. I only got one. The Two Do Men Twitter page was not that bad after Trump was convicted. I saw plenty of support. And the only people that were cheering were the people, JoJo, Brooklyn Dad, Nancy Pelosi.
They all blocked me, so I can't see any of them anymore.
But it was the only people that were like, the rule of law has been restored, hurrah, was like Nancy Pelosi. You know what I mean? Like, it was just these useless people whose voice means nothing now.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. All right, let's get on to our tweets here.
Yes, sir.
And, then we'll wrap things up. So my first one, I got 3, Captain got 1. My first one actually comes with a video. and it's a minute-long video. I want to read and I want to watch the video. This is one of the most interesting things I have heard. And this is from Ryan Grimm. Ryan Grimm says, former Pakistan Prime Minister.
You're not. Hold on, you're not sharing. It's still the.
Oh yeah, sorry. I forgot. StreamYard. There we go. Okay.
There we go.
Ryan Grimm says, former Pakistan PM Imran Khan is currently in prison on charges of an un-Islamic marriage because the court ruled his wife hadn't had enough menstrual cycles between her official divorce and her marriage to Khan. I asked the State Department why it can sanction Georgia over a foreign agent law, but Pakistan can jail its most popular politician over his wife's menstrual cycle, and the state doesn't say a peep. Here's our exchange. Strap in for this one, Cap.
This is even more bizarre than Kim Jong-un dropping shit on South Korea
2 weeks in a row.
Question. I'm not sure if you saw. Imran Khan was acquitted of his previous conviction on the Cypher case. So the only case that he's currently jailed for is what's known as this un-Islamic marriage charge. So the most popular politician in Pakistan is currently in jail because the Pakistani court says that there were not enough menstrual cycles between his wife's divorce and his marriage. So you talked earlier about the Georgia law, and that was undermining Georgian democracy. You know, why is the State Department willing to weigh in on a law passed through the Georgian legislature, but something insane like this, that's a matter for the Pakistani courts?
I'll point out, he's not talking about Georgia, America. He's talking about Georgia and Asia. Yeah.
So I just don't have any further comment on the case. We look at when we look at different countries, we take into account appropriate context, circumstances in making our judgments. We've addressed the question of Imran Khan many times. The legal proceedings against him are something for the Pakistani courts to decide.
Could that really be
in accordance with their laws and constitution?
But could that really be a matter for the Pakistani courts? Could that possibly be the State Department's position?
It is our position that when you come to these laws in Pakistan and this court case, it is something for the Pakistani courts to decide. And you just saw, to this question, charges against him thrown out by the courts.
So
you know, just let me make a comment and you could go crazy on it. If you just look at his body language and the way he acted and responded to that question, and you look at Cuomo and his body language and the way he reacted to Dave's questions, part of the machine, people.
Yep.
Part of the machine.
Yeah, well, of course, spokesperson for the State Department, this is job, right? Official liar. Boy, let me tell you, remember when the Taliban took over Afghanistan? What was one of the first things all these people that love war were saying? Women's rights in Afghanistan are now under attack, and this is a travesty. This is why we have to stay there for another 150 years. But when the same thing, in a sense, happens to Imran Khan, he's in jail because of an improper Islamic marriage to his wife, they don't say a fucking peep about it or care about it. Why? Well, that's because Imran Khan, I know a little bit about this part of the world and history. I'm friends with a Pakistani dude. Imran Khan is very much so a populist and is not always in line with the American empire. He's floated out the idea of entertaining the BRICS alliance. He was outspoken about the war in Ukraine and kind of saying some of the similar things that we've said on this podcast about NATO and things. They threw that motherfucker in jail. Right? They cooed him and threw him in jail. And they're not saying anything now about the outrageous nature of his charges because they don't actually give a fuck about democracy or the fact that he's popular in Pakistan. They want him in prison. So they're great. This is one of those like kryptonite things that they can't defend. Like when Jen Psaki said, you can't work out, right? This is the same fucking thing, right? This is literally the same thing.
He's guilty for the same thing Trump's guilty for. Being a threat to the establishment, opposing the regime, opposing the regime. That's like what he's guilty for.
In a different country on the other side of the planet, in a sense, it's honestly even more important, right? Because he's like he's potentially aligning himself with the other power centers, foreign competitors of the empire around the world. Potentially, not even saying that he was just flirting with the BRICS thing and whatnot. And they cooed him, threw his ass in prison.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Because and now he's staying in prison because of menstrual cycles of his wife. His wife. My goodness. All right, let's go over to your.
Let's just go down yours and we'll end with mine.
Okay, all right.
Because I know what mine is, so it has nothing to do with what we spoke about today.
Okay. All right. So this one comes from the Arizona Libertarian Party.
Oh boy.
And they're responding to Meghan McCain, John McCain's daughter. So Meghan McCain goes, do libertarians ever do anything other than tweet? So the Arizona Libertarian Party goes, Meghan McCain. Okay, pork chop. We need to clear a few things up. Your family name is a stain on our great state. Daddy was a blood-soaked monster who never met a congressionally unauthorized war he didn't like, and you've accomplished nothing on your own merit. You ride his coattails and pretend to be Princess of Arizona. We get it. You're not desert royalty. You're a spoiled, pretentious little brat screaming about his legacy. His legacy is that of death and destruction for profit. Your greatness is imaginary. You stand on the carcasses of civilians, and Daddy is in hell. Glad we could have this little chat.
Daddy is in hell. Holy shit. I got to say, these state libertarian accounts are just some of the wildest things to come out on Twitter. There is no filter, no holds bar, no fucks given.
Yeah, some of them are savage. Some of them are kind of cringe too. That's the nature of the Libertarian Party. It's not a monolith, right?
That is truly an amazing response.
By the way, again, she was quote tweeting them, so like she kind of went after them first, and my goodness, what a response!
Big mistake.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to my next one. And this one, a little bit of a downer here, but
nope. Switch it over.
Yep. Sorry. So this one is from Thomas Massey. And Thomas Massey says, I don't think the country is fixable, but I'm here in case it is. I thought that was pretty notable, man. Thomas Massey. Okay. So this one,
2028.
I'm not saying, I don't even think he's saying he's going to run for president. I think he's a really smart person. And the fact that he's saying, I don't think the country is fixable, that holds weight with me. Right, like I don't easily.
I know. I understand why he does. He's a man of principle and
Thomas
stuff.
Massey says, saying like, I'm here. I'm going to try and keep fixing it. Don't actually think it's fixable. I think he's a little bit more in the know, perhaps, than I am. So I hate to be nihilistic, right? But that one stood out to me.
I mean, it could just be the case of you're working in a company that has bad leadership, and you're just trying to put out fire after fire after fire, and you get nowhere, and you get abused for it, you get no reward for it, and you just sit back now and you eat your popcorn and you watch you just watch it burn to the ground. Your efforts are just going unnoticed 100% of the time. Let it burn. If you want it to be fixed, I'm here. Let's go. But until then, burn it down.
I don't know, man. That one stood out to me. Like I said, I could probably do a whole episode on that in of itself. All right, so the last tweet here is the captain's tweet. Go for it.
Yes, from End Wokeness. It is June. It is Gay Pride Month, but more importantly, it is Men's Awareness Month, which is what we should be celebrating. But anyway, this is my favorite tweet of all time for Pride Month. Because if you listen to the end of last week's episode, I said if you're interested in knowing what virtue signaling is, look at BMW America's logo on Twitter and look at BMW Middle East logo on Twitter. And it is a picture it's on End Wokeness, and it is a side-by-side comparison of Mercedes-Benz USA, Mercedes-Benz Middle East, BMW Middle East. What is that? Citgo Middle East. But my point is, all the American Twitter accounts have the rainbow to virtue signal that they are in support of gay pride, but their Middle East logos have not changed. So does the company really care about pride, or do they care about showing face?
Yeah. They care about showing face. I think it's a little bit of both too. I'd say that they also care about the market that they're trying to sell to, but I'd say they care more about what the policy of the regime that they're operating in is like friendly towards. And here in America, it's all about DEI, ESG, the woke stuff right now, and that's all being pushed from the top down to the bottom. In the Middle East, you get thrown off a fucking roof, and that is the law of the land. Yeah. Right. And in order to do business in those countries, you're going to have to
not show support.
Right, not show support and do, toe the line in that regard. Right, so I think that's also probably more of the picture of it. So,
and
instead of them like pandering to a base of people.
Yeah. And shout out to the 11 NFL teams that did not change their logo to Pride logos. You got Minnesota, you got Pittsburgh, you got Kansas City, you got the Bengals, and a few others, but this shit's not flying all over the place anymore.
The Giants are gay. I saw they posted.
Yes, the Giants were excited to become gay for just a month. They won't be gay next month, but yeah. So there you have it. Anything else, Gags?
Nope, that's it.
All right, Doom Nation. This has been another episode of the Two Doom Men podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter. Go to our Instagram page. Check our link tree out. Follow us everywhere, and interact with us. There was no comments today. That kind of sucked, but we'd love to respond to them. So in the future, hit us up, and we'll respond to your comments. And on that note, adios, Doom Nation.